Hi, Mr. Heyman. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Well, I can't complain too much. Just dealing with this crazy quarantine. But I'm glad you could make it out to the appointment because I have some really exciting news for you. I received your labs back, and all of your labs are clear.
Awesome.
So I know even though you told me that you had some concerns about lack of micronutrients in your diet, it's not reflected in your labs. So basically, I could have told you this over the phone, but since you needed to go to the general store and stopped on in, that is just fine. And unless you have anything else, I really don't have any more information for you.
Yeah, I did have a question. I had, and people keep throwing around the word metabolism, and I was wondering how does the metabolism work?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's easy. So it's really not easy. It's actually pretty complicated. So I'll just kind of break it down into little pieces. If I go into a rant or if you need help understanding something I'm telling you, then please stop me. I don't have a problem trying to explain or do a little research for you. So, but with metabolism, the goal is energy in. You need nutrition to create energy to live. That's the overall goal.
Right.
But when you look at it and kind of break down the processes of metabolism, you want to look at certain things. And so particularly, I'll just kind of let you know what happens after you eat a meal. And in biochemistry, that's referred to, or chemistry in general, and probably physiology as well, that's referred to as the fed state. In this state, food is digested, and the digestion starts as soon as you eat the food. It starts with the digestion and the breakdown of carbohydrates in the mouth, followed by fats and proteins in the stomach and small intestines.
Right.
And the way it works is the food is digested. It hits your stomach, it hits your small intestines, and then your bloodstream. It's absorbed by your bloodstream. When that happens, your blood sugar rises. And so a release of digested nutrients into bloodstream stimulates a hormone called insulin. But you're pretty familiar with hormones, right?
Right.
Okay, so I don't really need to dive into that. So anyway, it stimulates the insulin release by the pancreas. The insulin increases uptake of glucose by all cells, and then your blood concentration is reduced to homeostasis because the goal is to kind of keep that blood glucose level so that your brain is continuously and consistently receiving glucose. So then your liver cells convert excess glucose to glycogen for storage via glucose 6-phosphate. Amino acids are converted to ketone bodies for later conversion to acetyl-CoA. Muscle cells convert excess glucose to glycogen for storage via the glucose 6-phosphate. Amino acids are used to synthesize actin and myosin to rebuild muscle fibers. Your adipose cells store lipids, increasing fat reserves. The adipose cells are your fat.
Like love handles.
Right, your love handles. So basically, the carbs start to break down in the mouth, protein and fats, stomach, and the small intestines. But in the fasted state, like say you eat dinner at 8 o'clock at night and you don't eat again until, maybe 12 because you do that intermittent fasting, your body relies on stored glycogen. So glucose levels will drop in this state. Insulin levels will also drop. Glycogen and triglyceride levels slow down. Glucagon released from the alpha cells of the pancreas. And glucagon inhibits glycogen synthesis, and it stimulates the breakdown of stored glycogen back to glucagon. Glucose is released from the liver to support tissues and brain. Blood glucose levels rise. Glucogenesis begins in the liver to replace glucose. And whenever you use genesis, that means to remake something or to make something that's new. And so then glucose processing changes. Peripheral tissue absorbs glucose, and the liver will not absorb glucose after a prolonged fast. Glucogenesis will continue to replace depleted glycogen stores, and after stores are replenished, excess glucose will be converted into triglycerides and fatty acids for long-term storage. So the fasted state is a little bit different, but when you think about it, your body is not receiving fuel. And once again, if the goal is to maintain that blood glucose level, then it needs to do something. So it's so smart that it knows, okay, I'm going to use this for this, I'm going to use that for this. But some of the fasted state activity includes glycogenolysis, which is the breakdown of glycogen into glucose, gluconeogenesis, metabolic pathway. It generates glucose from non-carbohydrate carbon substrates. And a substrate is just like an underlying substance or a layer of something. And then you have lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fat by hydrolysis to release fatty acids, hence lipo. Then you have ketogenesis. Organisms produce ketone bodies through breakdown of fatty acids and ketogenic amino acids. So, as you can see, I have some pamphlets here if you want to take these home and kind of read over what we just talked about.
So I do have a question. You were mentioning pathways. When you say pathways, what do you mean?
Oh yeah, I have some information on the pathways as well. So I'll just go over some of the metabolic pathways. We'll talk about glycogen synthesis. The organ that is involved in glycogen synthesis obviously is going to be your liver and your muscle cells. It's stimulated by insulin and it's inhibited by glucagon. A rate-limiting enzyme in this process is glucose 6-phosphatase. The enzyme regulator, which normally is the slowest enzyme, is going to be your glycogen synthase. The nutrients that you need is basically some kind of sugar, but I'm going to say fructose. What this produces for you is glucose storage during fasting and maybe disposal of glucose. It also takes care of the fuel for cells. And you need this because you're going to need something for muscle activity. Right. So, yeah, that's just really, really the process to take care of all those things. And then you have glycolysis. This is another process that takes place in the liver and the pancreas, and it's stimulated by insulin. It's inhibited by the depletion of hexokinase. The rate-limiting enzyme is PFK, and the enzyme regulator is PFK1. The nutrients that you need for this particular pathway are glucose, basically glycolysis, so sugar. And so some of the cofactors are NAD plus and ATP. And then you have what this is going to do for you is to help you to metabolize sugar. It's going to create ATP for the electron transport chain.
When you say ATP, what is ATP?
It's kind of just think about power, energy. Right. Yeah. So, and it's also going to reduce NADH. So a lot of the processes within your body need to be maintained, and in order to obtain or ascertain homeostasis, a lot of things have to fluctuate. Many things have to be remade into something else. And really those essential chemicals that are needed for vital processes. Then you have the electron transport chain, as I previously mentioned. The organ involvement here is liver. And it kind of takes place inside the inner mitochondria, kind of the powerhouse, hence electron transport chain. If something's transporting, it's going to be using a lot of energy. It's stimulated by ADP, and it's inhibited by ATP. Now, the rate-limiting enzyme for this one is cytochrome oxidase, and the coenzymes are NAD plus and ATP. The nutrients needed for this pathway are B vitamin, selenium, CoQ10, carnitine, lipoic acid, melatonin, and caffeine. And what this is going to do for you is going to make energy. Obviously, electron transport chain is going to move those electrons wherever they need to be to make energy. It shuttles electrons from NADH, FADH2 to energy. And it's kind of like, it's a proton pump. So just imagine a transporter going through, just constantly transferring electrons, transferring power, taking power away and moving it to where it needs to be. Then you have the citric acid cycle, and this kind of takes place in the mitochondrial matrix. It's stimulated by citrate concentration of ATP and NADH, and then it's inhibited by acetyl-CoA, ATP, NADH. The rate limiting enzyme is isocitrate dehydrogenase, and the enzyme regulator is also isocitrate dehydrogenase and alpha ketoglutarate dehydrogenase. The nutrients or the fuel that's needed is carbs, protein, and fat, basically food. And what's going to happen is it's going to help you to break down the sugars, the fatty acids, and amino acids and convert a ketoglutarate and carbon dioxide to provide energy. And it kind of helps you out with cellular respiration, helps to produce ATP for the cell. Once again, energy producer. And so then you have your cholesterol synthesis. You know where the cholesterol is. It's in the meat, and you love to eat meat, so this is a pretty important one for you. And so the organ involved is obviously your liver, your intestines, your adrenals, and your reproductive organs. This one's stimulated by cholesterol in the diet or synthesized. So I think with this one in the fed and fasted state, it's going to use the same thing, just at different levels. And then this one's inhibited by HMG-CoA reductase or statins. And that's why a lot of people who have high cholesterol use statins to block the absorption of cholesterol. The rate limiting enzyme is 7-alpha hydroxylase. The enzyme regulator is HMG-CoA reductase. And then the nutrients needed, cholesterol or animal fat or calcium. This is going to help you to make hormones, make your bile acids. These are all very important things. Regulates fat-soluble vitamins. Like vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. And I know it's one of your favorite vitamins, so you need to know that cholesterol plays a big part in absorbing that properly. It also regulates membrane fluidity. So we have a few more to discuss. We'll talk about beta oxidation, and that occurs in the mitochondria and the cytosol. It's stimulated by acyl-CoA synthase and also by some trifunctional proteins of the mitochondria. It's inhibited by PFOX, and the rate-limiting enzyme is CPT1, carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1. And the enzyme regulator is acyl-CoA dehydrogenase, acyl-CoA hydratase, hydroxyacyl-CoA dehydrogenase, and keto-acyl-CoA thiolase. I'm going to give you this information so that you can kind of review it and do a little research. The nutrients needed in this pathway is fatty acids, because obviously it's beta oxidation. So this is where you're going to have your breakdown of fatty acids to generate acyl-CoA or energy. It generates ATP for heart and skeleton, so it's pretty important. And then you have your pentose phosphate pathway, which is kind of a parallel pathway to glycolysis. And the organ obviously is going to be the liver, and it takes place in the cytosol of the cell or the mammary glands or adrenal cortex. Stimulated by NADP plus, and then inhibited by NADPH. The rate-limiting enzyme is insulin, which increases expression of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. And the enzyme regulator is also glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. The nutrients needed here are vitamin E, C, beta-carotene. This is going to help you to neutralize the free radicals in your body. The NADH molecules, ribose 5-phosphate. A lot is needed here, just like with glycolysis. And then what this is going to get you is it's going to help you to generate reducing equivalents, things to help you to make things into other things that are needed. R5P to synthesize nucleotides and nucleic acid and steroids and metabolize dietary pentose sugars. Remove free radicals, like I said before. And most importantly, I think, is to make DNA and RNA. So this one's super duper high energy. Then the last one that I'll discuss is the urea cycle. And the organs involved, the liver and the kidneys. This one's stimulated by glutamate and ammonia. It's inhibited by alanine and a decrease in ornithine. The rate-limiting enzyme is carbamoyl phosphate synthase. The enzyme regulator is glucagon.
Can I stop you right there? When you
Sure.
talk about the rate limiting, is that at the speed at which this?
Yeah, it's really this. If there's lots of enzymes involved, it's the slowest enzyme.
Okay.
You know how they say you're only as good as your slowest runner.
Right.
Kind of the same thing.
Okay.
So it kind of sets the pace.
Okay.
And so then you have insulin and other enzymes. So the nutrients needed, basically, I would say fuel needed is excess nitrogen and ammonia. And what this is going to do for you in the metabolic process is help you to eliminate nitrogen and amino acid and metabolize amino acids. So you can take the list home and kind of just look over them for yourself.
Okay, so let me ask you another question.
Okay.
So these pathways are the same no matter what for the fed and the fasted, or
No, they're different.
Okay.
So like in glycolysis, in the fed state, lipids and amino acids are synthesized to generate ATP energy, and products are oxidized to generate ATP. But in the fasted state, hepatocytes switch to increase beta oxidation for energy supply. And like in the pentose phosphate pathway, which is, it's kind of the one that parallels glycolysis. In the fed state, it produces NADPH, obviously, because you're putting food in, so you're going to get lots of energy out. The glucose 6-phosphate is converted to fructose 6-phosphate. Glucose and energy are high. No ATP is generated. In the fasted state, this one really doesn't apply. You typically don't get to this point in the fasted state. So, in the electron transport chain in the fed state, lots of ATP is formed to produce water and energy, but in the fasted state, it's more focused on increasing NAD cellular levels. Process reduced in fasted. Hexokinase is reduced, inhibiting NAD. So again, trying to find that homeostasis and dealing with deficits of certain energy coming in, these pathways have to kind of switch and do different things. Cholesterol synthesis in the fasted state, oxidation of hepatic free fatty acids supplies energy for glucose production. But in the fed state, in both states on this one, formation of membranes, hormone synthesis, bile acid production must take place. So then just the level of these things happening changes. And then in urea cycle in the fed state, after a high protein meal, amino acid catabolism, it fluctuates, but it's most notable from the fasted to fed. Excess amino acids are catabolized for every gluconeogenesis and glucogenesis. But in the fasted state, glucagon and adrenaline are kind of the key players, and insulin levels decrease, and then protein synthesizes excess amino acids are catabolized, and muscular amino acids are used as gluconeogenesis substrates. So again, everybody is switching around to maintain, life. Everyone is trying to prioritize what's needed, and so everything is adjusted. So in the citric acid cycle in the fed state, the products process fatty acid. So the products of the citric acid cycle processes fatty acids towards making ATP and NADH. But in the fasted state, the products of the citric acid cycle are converted to glucose. Again, we're trying to get energy, but acetyl-CoA has already been used as energy in that one.
Right.
So beta oxidation in the fed state, glycolytic products synthesize fatty acids via lipogenesis for energy. But in the fasted state, liver secretes glucose through breakdown of glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, and energy needs are decreased to produce acetyl-CoA. So, as you can see, it gets kind of complicated, but everything kind of works together for your good.
So to me, basically, with all the handouts and the information you've given me, it seems like the body will pretty much take care of itself. Am I right in that assumption?
Well, most of the time, yes. Under optimal situations where you have a healthy individual who does not have any kind of pathogenic disease activity, yes. But there are situations where if these pathways are malfunctioning or due to some kind of hereditary deficiency with an enzyme, it could create big health problems. So you can Google the Merck manual, the 2020 Merck manual. It just talks about beta oxidation cycle disorders. It talks about glycogen synthesis disorders such as glycogen storage disease, which is an enzyme deficiency. It's typically genetic, but it can also be acquired. It's a problem with glycogen synthesis, and it creates enzyme irregularity and lots of pain. And then you have your urea cycle disorders. You have glycolytic pathway deficiencies, and those are really bad. They can cause hemolytic anemia and or carbohydrate metabolism disorders. And so once you go to this site, you'll be able to look at kind of the symptoms just to make sure you're good. But I think that's it. No, well, so with cholesterol, there's stuff that could go wrong with your cholesterol. You have dyslipidemia or hypolipidemia, and that again has to do with levels of LDL and sometimes your overall cholesterol numbers. And then you have your electron transport chain. Kind of the same stuff you deal with beta oxidation is going to be your issues when dealing with problems with your electron transport chain. The citric acid cycle, that could be terrible. You could end up with uridine monophosphate synthase deficiency, but typically this is hereditary. And then lastly, the pentose phosphate pathway. You don't want to have any problems with that because carbohydrate disorders are the worst. A lot of them kind of, I guess you could say that with glycogen synthesis, the same problems you would have with that you'd have with the pentose phosphate pathway, like the glycogen storage disease. So it just pays to really take care of yourself.
Right. So basically what I got from this is I need to eat right, watch what I'm eating and taking into my body, and potentially exercise to make sure that my body is operating at the optimal level that it could be to sustain whatever it is I'm doing at the time, i.e. if I'm working out. Make sure I take the appropriate carbohydrates, spaghetti, that type of stuff.
Moderation is the key, and a well-balanced whole food diet is what I would recommend. That way you're pretty sure to get everything you need, but a nice multivitamin will be recommended as well. Is there anything else, Mr. Hayden?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. See you next time.
Have a great one.
Bye.